became the disco queens because everything back then was disco. And we loved to dance. And we could go out dancing. There were 4 different bars that were open for dancing from Thursday night until Monday night. Sometimes I wondered how I managed to make it to work. Because there wasn't a lot of drinking back then for us. We were just going out dancing, which is great to be able to go out and feel safe. And the studio was a place where we felt safe, we felt comfortable, we felt welcome. And the studio was set up on 2 levels. On the main level, there was a bar, restaurant, and an amazing dance floor. And in the basement, there were different small rooms. There was a room where you could play pool. There was a room where they provided female strippers for us dykes. There was another room where they provided male strippers for the gay men. There was a room where they showed gay and lesbian movies. It was amazing for something like that to be happening back in the late 70s, early 80s. Was unheard of. So many of us went to the studio. And the other place that was very similar was, I'll get to Katrina's after. So Zippers and Gasworks replaced the studio, and now that space is conference. Loot is the only building at 342 Jarvis that is still standing. When you hear all these historical places, Loot, that building is the only building that still exists. So the Cameo, how many of you have heard of the Cameo? Nobody has heard of the Cameo. So the Cameo was what you would call a dive. The Cameo was downstairs, and it was way down on Trinity near Eastern, out in the East End. And it was famous for having foil on the ceilings. I don't know where they came up with that design idea, but it was when we decided we were going to go there, somebody said to us, look for the foil on the ceilings, and the beer is cheap. So that's why we decided to go. So, and they said the music was good. So 4 of us went there, 4 raisins in the rice pudding of the Cameo. Get it? Raisins, rice pudding. So we go in there, but nobody had warned us about what to expect. So we go in and we get to the door and we're looking in, and we're wearing just street clothes, shirts, jeans. It was sort of late summer, early fall. It was still fairly warm. And we get in, we pay our money at the door, and I was the first one into the room, and I thought to myself, we're in the wrong place. But I saw the foil on the ceiling, so I knew this was the Cameo. Because there were men in tuxedos and 3-piece suits, and women in ball gowns and evening dresses. And I looked at my 3 friends and they said, so what do we do now? They said, let's go and sit as far away at the end as possible. And everybody was white, dressed like this. And there were these long trestle tables. I'm describing this for you for a reason. These long trestle. You know those tables, you fold the legs under, the old wooden tables. So there were rows of these tables, and they formed a square around the dance floor. So we went and we sat way at the end, and we were drinking the cheap beer. Can you still hear me? Yeah. And suddenly we heard bottles up. We thought, oh, so we picked up our bottles very quickly, and we saw a body come sliding down the whole row. So just imagine, on one side of the tables are these men dressed in their suits and tuxedos, and facing them are the women wearing the gowns. And we heard bottles up, and this body, a male person, came sliding down, coming towards us where we were sitting, and we very quickly jumped up, and the body just slid off the end of the table. So we stood in the corner, and I went over to a woman who was wearing a ball gown because I wasn't approaching any of the men. And I said, so what just happened? And she said, well, a butch looked at somebody else's femme without punishment. So back then, all it took was a look. So these were all women, we discovered. But this is a bar where role play, I don't know if you've heard of, what is the woman's name? leZlie Feinstein, I think Stone Cold Butch is the name of the book. So butchers back then, when they said Stone Cold, that's like they were butch, they were men. They dressed like men, they behaved like men. And you did not dare, when you went to that bar, you had to be so careful if you were part of that scene. So the body came off the end, and we went to the bathroom, like within a minute of the body coming off of the end of the table. We went to the bathroom, and the femme who was looked at inappropriately, that femme's butch came around and attacked the other place. So this place was known for fighting. It was very, and these are things you don't hear about. It was very violent. There was blood on the floor. We decided we did not need to pee in that moment. We waited. But we discovered that if we went with our friends who dressed like us and looked like us, we felt fairly safe. The music was good, and the irony of going to the cameo is about 2 years later, I met somebody there who was also from Trinidad, and we ended up being partners for 10 years. So that worked out. But at the same time that the cameo was happening, and if you have the time to read this article at the end there, at the same time the cameo was happening, there were a couple of other bars called the Blue Jay, Eves, and Deja Vu. And these were also into role play, but it was called light role play, not stone cold role play. So we would go, because as soon as a new bar opened, you went because you wanted to see what it was like, and you wanted to meet women because you're always looking to meet women. And one of the things I forgot to mention, back then, potlucks. I don't know if you've heard of potlucks. So potlucks were very popular with women who identified as being feminists. So if you wanted to get involved with somebody, you had to get your way into a potluck dinner and make a dish that she might like. So there was all this maneuvering. So even though there was this whole thing about feminism that was happening at the same time, really, what's the way to a woman's heart? It's through her stomach. and the other thing I discovered back then is there were so many lesbians who were vegetarians. So I made up this little joke that I was not a vegetarian, I was a vegetarian. Yeah, so the cameo, okay. And oh yes, the other thing I wanted to tell you about men's bars. So just around the corner from the cameo on Eastern Avenue was a place called the Toolbox, which was a men's bar. And women were only allowed to go in if they were accompanied by a man. And one weekend, some friends of mine, their brother was coming in, and so they wanted to take him to the Toolbox. So since he was a man, we could go in with him. So there were 4 of us women who went with his friend's brother into the Toolbox. And they said to me, go up and get some drinks. So again, me looking androgynous, I'm up at the bar, going to order some beverages, and on either side of me there's a man standing. So I'm not paying attention to them. I'm waiting to get the attention of the bartender. And suddenly I see 2 bottles of beer appear in front of me. And I thought, well, I didn't order these. And then I felt the man on either side of me, the men on either side started getting closer. And then next thing I knew, there was a hand on my behind and a hand right up in my crotch. That's how aggressive men were, because they thought I was a fag. Because I looked like a fag. I was being, my friend and I were being mistaken for fags all the time. But that was the first time I had gotten free drinks for mistakenly looking like a fag. And men of color who were fags were few and far between back then. So anyway, I got the free drinks. I looked at them and I said, I'm a dyke. I'm not a fag. Thanks for the drinks. Never went back there again. Because I did not dare do that. So the other place I wanted to tell you about was Chez Moi. Have I gone by Katrina's? My stuff is not on anymore. Please bear with me. Oh no, we haven't lost Katrina's. So Chez Moi. I don't know if you've heard of Chez Moi. So Chez Moi was at 30 Hayden Street, just up the road. So the Chez, on one side it opened onto Bloor Street, and on the other side it opened onto Hayden. I know the Chez very well because I used to work at Manulife Insurance. And I started working at Manulife Insurance from 1976 until 1986. And in those 10 years, from Young Street over to Sherborne was called Insurance Row. All the big insurance companies had their head offices on Bloor Street. So the Chez was a place where we would go and have meetings. And at that point at Manulife, I had worked my way up into lower management. And so we would have business meetings in the Chez. Working at Manulife was really interesting. My first day on the job at Manulife. So I started at Manulife in 76. I came out through Loot in 76. And when I came out through Loot, I identified as a lesbian for about 3 days. And then I started hearing the word dyke. So I asked, what did that word mean? And they said, well, you know, dykes are braver than lesbians. They like to protest and they get into trouble. So I said, that's me. So I'm a proud card-carrying dyke of 46 years. You can try and guess my age. So anyway, when I started working at Manulife, my first day on the job, there was a dress code. You had to wear, if you're a woman, you could wear a dress or dress pants and dress shirts. So I was not wearing dresses. I was wearing dress pants, dress shirts. I had my sleeves rolled up like 3/4. And I go into the women's washroom and I'm in the stall doing my business. And there were 3 women of color at the sinks. And they were all from the Caribbean, and of course I can understand everything they're saying. And they're saying, oh Lord, look at that one that's just coming in. Is a man or is a woman? Is a he, she? And I'm thinking, yes, they're talking about me. I just went to Loot, I know what they're talking about. And now it's playing out in my movies. So I came out of the stall and I went over to the sink. And I said to them in my best Trini accent, guess where I'm from? You're from Trinidad? Yes, I'm from Trinidad. I just understood everything you said. And I am a woman. And in case you don't know what it means, I'm a dyke. A dyke? You mean you're a lesbian? I said, no, I'm not a lesbian, I'm a dyke. What is a dyke? I said, go and find out. So, I started on a Monday, the rumors started flying that something was wrong with this one. Be careful around it. I wasn't even a person. I was an it. So I went to personnel. There was no human resources back then. I went to personnel and said, I just started this job. Rumors have started. And if anything happens to me in my job, there's going to be hell to pay. There was nothing about human rights for us back then. So it was then I decided the best thing to keep me safe was for me to be out. I made that decision then, because by being out, I was in your face. I would know right up front how you felt about me. And I've continued doing that to this day. And now I advocate for queer seniors. And I have had older white straight women come up to me and say, why do you have to say you're a lesbian? Can't you just say you're a lesbian? I said, but you don't have to whisper. It's on my bio. It's on everything. Everybody knows I'm a dyke. I said, because if I don't say it, the people who are in the room who are hiding, because as we get older, we hide in order to get good health care and in order to be taken care of. I said, I have to let everybody know that I am a dyke and I'm speaking for you because you're afraid. And because you're afraid, somebody has to speak on your behalf. And I say to these white, straight, older women, it's never the men. This is why it's important for me to be out there as a dyke, because I have to take care of my people. So that's why I decided way back then that I was going to be out. So at the shade, getting back to the shade, it was really interesting because during the day, it was all business. And between 7 and about 7:30, the crowd started shifting. And one night, I think it's on the postcard, I was in there. And on that same day, earlier in the day, I had a business meeting with my boss, a white straight man, I thought. And I'm sitting there waiting for friends to come and meet me because now it's the shades becoming gay at night. And lo and behold, there's my boss. We had just had a straight business meeting. So we were both surprised to see each other there. But the interesting thing was, he said to me when we were leaving the bar that night, he says, please don't say anything about me. He said, if you want to be out, that's your business. And I said, I respect your wishes because I have never outed anybody and I don't intend to. So the Shea went through many hands of ownership. I think it was as recently as the late 80s, early 90s. They tried to revive it, but it didn't last very long. But that was a spot that was above ground. It was wonderful. It was a family-owned place, and we really enjoyed going there. Just looking at the time. Okay, moving along. Katrina's. Has anybody heard of Katrina's? So Katrina's, yes? Yeah. Have you been? Yeah, so you know. The dance floor raised, beautiful. Katrina's was at 5 St. Joseph, just around the corner here on Young Street. Condos again. Everything has gone by the way of condos. So Katrina's was lovely, and it was very similar to the studio in terms of how it was decorated. It was clean, we were well taken care of. Women and men danced together and partied together. So remember now in the toolbox, I discovered my magic power of getting free beverages. So a friend of mine, Julie, the same one who was kicked out of Loot, she and I decided, well, now we know how to get free beer. We made a point. And every couple of weeks, we would show up looking more like fags than fags themselves. And back then, fags used to wear these very tight white shirts and button down to here. I'm very flat-chested, so my buttons came down, and they would have a little pack of cigarettes rolled up. So we had our little pack of cigarettes rolled up in the shirts. You remember them? So the first time we decided to try this out, we on the dance floor, and The waiter brought over 2 bottles of beer, one for each of us, and we saying, well, we didn't order these beers, and the waiter's pointing. These 2 guys are. So they kept looking at us, and we were saying like, thank you, and we were dancing. And I said to my friend Judy, there's going to be trouble if they come over here. What are we going to do? And the dance floor was raised, and it was sort of like enclosed in a square. And there was only one set of steps to get off. And I said, let's get close to the steps. And the guys started getting closer. And they come up onto the dance floor. They put themselves one on either side of us. And they say, so did you enjoy the beer? Yes, thank you very much. See ya. Bye. Because at that point, we knew they would have wanted more. So we had to be very careful doing the fag trick. But Katrina's was lovely. And again, rumor had it that it was owned. Anytime there was a bar that was really nice, the rumor was that it was owned by the mafia. So the last place I'm going to talk about was more recent. So Katrina's was back in the mid-1970s. And the Red Spot, I'm talking about the Red Spot because that was the last place that I went to where I did community organizing. It was on Church Street. And I think where Sailors is, upstairs Sailors, that's where the Red Spot was. And it was the only spot that was managed by a man of color on Church Street back in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was the only space that we had as queer folks of color back on Church Street back then. And there's never been another spot since then. And he was really warm and welcoming. And I don't know how many of you know this. I only discovered this recently because I was just saying to Caitlin and Stephanie that I sit on the City of Toronto's 2S LGBTQ Community Advisory Board. And we found out through being on that board that all of the queer bars on Church Street, all of that real estate is owned by white, straight people. There's nothing on Church Street apart from Glad Day that's owned by queer folks. It's all straight white people that own all that real estate on Church Street. So just think about where your money is going. So the Red Spot was wonderful, and all of the different groups of color had a different night every week or every month. And a friend of mine, Carol Thames, who is a Black Jamaican lesbian, and I called our night Island Spice, and we featured 2S LGBTQI performers, DJs, and our nights were only for queer folks of color and their friends. So it was always packed. And I persuaded the manager to pay my DJs because I had to be, thrifty with my money. So he would pay the DJs, and what the money that we made from the door, we would pay the performers, and he got the bar, we got the door, and he provided us with food and Jello shots because he was guaranteed a full house every time we had an event there. And we decided, because everything that I do is political, whenever we had an event, the money went to a shelter or it went to the Rape Crisis Center. And the last Island Spice night that we had there, we featured Andayan. I don't know how many of you have heard of Andayan. It's a Native women's shelter here in Toronto. It's the only one. And they get the least amount of funding from the provincial government. So we decided we would feature Andayan on the last night that we were allowed to have an event. And we featured only 2 spirit performers, DJs, and it was a huge, huge success. And I have to say the businesses on Church Street have always been very, very generous with me whenever I have asked for door prizes or raffle prizes. So that's been my journey coming out in Toronto and these 6 different places. We have about, 10 minutes?
Anybody has questions?
5 minutes for a Q&A?
Yeah, 5-ish.
5
Just over
minutes.
5, yeah.
So
About
thank
10.
you all for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And this is your opportunity now to ask me any questions that you would like. A question you might not want to ask me when I'm out there, but I'm giving you permission to ask me now.
Maybe just a comment, like you were talking about the places being owned, like the real estate being owned, and it's really rare. I think there's only one bar on the street where the person who owns the real estate actually runs the bar.
Which one is it?
Hair of the Dog.
Okay.
Is that? But some of the, like, I know Cruz is a person of color runs that as well. So the actual bar owner, but the people who own the real estate, there's a lot of investment firms now who own it, like KingSet and things like that. So it's an interesting thing though.
Yeah, sure. It was very sad to hear that.
Yeah, and even when the condos come in and there's commercial in the bottom, I don't want to get off your topic, but business owners don't get a chance to buy it. It just gets sold to a firm and then they rent it out.
Yeah, it goes through the developers. Yeah. And Church Street is changing. And I really encourage everybody to support Glad Day, because Glad Day is trying its best to become it was a community hub. I don't know what's happened since COVID because I haven't had a chance to be there. But please support Glad Day. Any questions, comments? Yes?
If you're going out for a night out and not in COVID times, where are you going now?
Now? Glad Day actually. Yeah. And there was a collective called the Rude Collective. I don't remember what Rude stands for. But they used to hold parties at the Gladstone. So that's another place where queer parties have been held. So the Gladstone. Buddies, I actually am on contract with Buddies through the Youth Elders Project.
Great.
So I'm going to be back November 1st. And I'm going to be talking about some other locations and some other work that I'm doing. So I'm going to give you a teaser. So Buddies is one of the places that's good to go to. And I am the program coordinator for the Youth Elders Project. So it's the first one of its kind in Canada that engages queer youth and queer elders. And you do not have to be a queer elder. So anybody who is queer, from the ages of 16 to whatever, because under 16 we can't have, without parental consent. It's right now it's online, and starting at the end of this month. It's been happening for 3 years now. Once a month we have a conversation with queer youth and everybody else plus, and different topics. And I facilitate with the queer youth, and it's starting the end of this month. So please check the Buddies website and check their new program and come and join us in the conversation. And the other thing I'm going to be talking about is Time After Time, which is the first queer senior social event that was held in Toronto starting in 2014, and that was with myself and Vanessa Dunn. I don't know if you've heard of Vanessa Dunn. Vag Halen. Anybody heard of Vag Halen? So Vanessa is the lead singer for Vag Halen. So as I said, a lot of my work now is advocating for queer seniors, because I like to tell my queer young friends, one day, if you are lucky, you too will be a queer senior. So we need to start working together. All of my work is intergenerational. I don't believe in me being over here and queer youth being over there. It's a lot easier for young people to come out. It's a lot more difficult to survive when you're younger and you're queer. You're having to share housing. There's no guarantee for jobs. All of my queer friends are working at least 3 jobs, and they're all having to share housing. And I would say of about 15 of my queer young friends, 1 was born in Toronto. The other 14 have fled violent lives, either in Ontario or outside of the province, to come here to feel like they belong, to feel welcome, to feel safe. And that is a sad state of affairs for queer youth. So I encourage anybody who is queer to start thinking about how can we support each other. Because when you support queer youth, you win. When queer youth supports queer seniors, they win. It's a win-win situation. And the other thing I'm going to be talking about is my organizing. I was one of a group of women who put ourselves into the Pride Parade for the very first time in 1991. Prior to 1991, there was no presence of queer people of color in the Toronto Pride Parade. And now I'm on the board of Pride because I decided I needed to infiltrate. And I will end with this little story because it will shock you. For 3 years, Pride funded an event for dogs. They got the money from Purina, and they funded nothing for queer seniors. 3 years, dogs, queer seniors, 0. So at one of their AGMs, I waited until all the media was there, and I went up to the mic, and I had been asking Pride to fund my event time after time, because we started that in 2014. And they said, we don't have time for that. Pride told me that back in 2014. So I shamed them in front of the media, and it went national. And I got a call from Pride that same evening saying, please don't talk about the dogs anymore. Tell us how much money you need to do an event, and we will fund it. So in 2017 was the first time that Pride Toronto funded an event for queer seniors. And now I'm on the board, we're doing a lot better.